And here I find you. I think I can love you.
So Travis, thanks for being on How Strong. I think the conversation we're going to have, and we've talked about this before. It's a real complicated topic when you talk about startups and you talk about deciding you're going to bet on yourself and leave a really good job and leave corporate America. And there's a leap you got to take, right? And we've had a ton of guests on so far that have done the same thing. I've not been as close to them as I was to you when you started this process. A lot of the people that I spoke to, I didn't know up until maybe a few years ago. They've all taken that leap. They've all bet on themselves, and they've all had some similar stories about how difficult it is to make that decision to leave your job and then start something new. I want to go back a little bit because I think the way that you and I met will make the story more interesting, because I actually met your wife first. And we both started up at a company in San Jose. It was then Next EV, and now it's Neo, which is a pretty big automotive company in China and in Europe. They'll come to America, I think, at some point. But I met her there, and she was grinding out, driving up to San Jose every day from LA. And I was flying out every Monday and Friday. And she had mentioned your name, and you guys were doing, you had an RV business, and you were also working in LA. And then Elizabeth and I both left Neo. And then I went over to Karma Automotive, which is where I met you. And then Elizabeth ended up coming to there to work a little bit later. And I think I was drawn to you because I think in every relationship, and I've talked about this too with some other people, when you meet people, you don't know how like-minded the other people are going to be. And I think with you, we were having conversations, and I was like, I wonder if I can go this far with this guy and see where this boundary is for this relationship, because I don't know if he has that same sense of humor I do and ideas. And every time I thought I'd crossed the line, it was never really that far off. And at some point, I think I realized there really isn't no line with Travis. There's just really good conversation. And it was a safe place for us to have conversations about life and about ideas. And I thought you were fantastically funny and really brilliant. And we've stayed friends, and I've seen you through this process, and I've seen a lot of the ups and a lot of downs, and then ups again and then downs again. So why don't you talk about, I think what's really interesting is, I don't want to go back to when you were working. I want to know when you decided that you needed to bet on yourself.
Wow. Needed to bet on myself. You know what? It started even before we met, though. I mean, I've been entrepreneurial since I was 16 years old. I was even on the front news page of our local paper because I was doing a detailing business and not working for the man. You know, I always felt this need to kind of work for myself. But I'll tell you, the transition from when we were working at Karma together to deciding to do RKS, it felt natural for me. And the reason why it felt natural is I think people who are entrepreneurial spirited, they're the dreamers. And the thing is that I feel like there's the dreamers and there's the dreamers who are also the doers. And I feel like a lot of people talk about it, but they don't do it. And I think this is where that transitional period happens within me, where I just feel like I gotta do this. And I feel like I don't want to go look back in my life and think I could have done it. Instead, I want to take that leap. And the fortunate thing that I have with me is that I'm not doing it alone. So Troy, I'm doing this with Elizabeth, with my wife. And there's not a lot of working relationships that you can do that, where you have the relationship at home and you can then separate it from your work. However, we have that dynamic. We've had that dynamic with the rental business where we were renting RVs, and we've been doing it for quite a few years. We met at work even prior to that. So working together is natural. And what it did is it allowed me to take that leap with her, where we were able to support each other. Because as you may know, there's this mental side where having your job where you have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, you have health benefits is provided and everything, you have security, you know when you're going to get paid. And taking that away and then putting your own money into something where we put in $250,000 of our own money. We put in everything into RKS. We were an all-in bet because of how much we thought this is the direction we should go. And it's hard. I mean, hard is an understatement. People around us think, oh, it's so great that you work for yourself. That must be so nice to have the flexibility. Oh my gosh, try it yourself. You will realize that there is no flexibility. And what it is you're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and you're constantly thinking about, what do I need to do next? Because you have 5 hats on and you're trying to figure out, how do I take care of the corporate side of this? How do I take care of the marketing side of this? How do I create my product? And how do you do it with limited resources?
Yeah, and I think the thing to address here too is this was pre-COVID. So I know a lot of people, when COVID happened, they're like, you know what, I'm going to get laid off, or I've been furloughed, and I kind of want to see what I could be doing on my own. And there were a lot of businesses that started up during COVID because a lot of people thought this might be a perfect opportunity for me to kind of dive into what I really want to do. And I knew a lot of people before COVID, and you and I had both known the same people. You know, if you ask them, are you living your best life? And I could tell you 90% of the people that you and I worked with and have known in other jobs and other industries, they're really not happy. They really, there are some people who dig going into an office and sitting behind a desk and doing the kind of work that they want to do, knowing they're going to get off at 5 and not think about this over the weekend, and they'll come back on Monday and go at it again. And they love that atmosphere. And there are some people, and I'm going to tell you right now, 90% of the people that I've known that have had jobs really don't want to do what they're doing. And they really have much better ideas. And I've always spotted, and I'd love to get your opinion on this too. I'm going to put this out there, and it's going to probably, to my own detriment. I don't feel like I'm hireable. I don't feel like at this point in my life I'm hireable because, and I've seen people like this, the people that are like, yeah, I don't know why we're doing it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a better way. And when you're that person in that company who's always trying to do things differently, trying to push the company to do things differently, and by no means did I have all the right answers, but I knew the right answer was that we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And I've slowly identified that those types of people should not be working for companies who don't appreciate the idea that we could be doing things better. And I've also experienced management above me. They're always one step in their position and one step out of their position. They're always looking for that next step. So they've never really been 100% in that role. They were in that role trying to figure out where the next step is going to be up for them. And taking a chance on an idea in their department to move things forward, to spend a little bit more money, that rocks the boat. They're not really willing to do that. And I've met a lot of people, you're one of them too, who really rock the boat for a very good reason. And I knew that my step outside of the company was because I could not want success for them more than they want it for themselves. And that's when we get in trouble, is when I want it more than the company wants it for themselves. And for me, that was like, I got to get out. I mean, that's the only way. And you always work that way. When I worked with you, you were always trying to go a different angle, a different way. And is that similar to you? Did you find yourself caring more about anybody you've worked with before than they've cared about their own success?
I would have to agree with you. And I think it's because for me, it's the entrepreneurial spirit. So when I get into a company, I treat the company as if it's my own. When I'm spending that dollar, it's my dollar that I'm spending. And I think a lot of people disassociate themselves from it because they just see it as a number. But I actually go in thinking, if this was my company, how would I run it? And I think that's where I think you're right about not being hireable to a certain degree. I think I've gotten to this stage in my life, and it's not to say that I'm not hireable at a higher level where I can have that autonomy. It's the problem is not having that autonomy, having great ideas that can move the company forward. And it's not to say it's like my idea is the best one, but it's being in that environment where we can brainstorm about it, we can figure out what's the right direction, and we can all focus on the success of that. And what I find in a lot of these companies, there's a loss of focus. There's different agendas. We talked about this before. Like, what is your agenda? Why are you here? Some people are there for the paycheck. Some people are there because they're passionate about the product. Some people are there because they just need to do something and not stay at home. The people who retired who go back to work. So why are they there? And so for me, I sort of disagree that I believe, Troy, that you are hireable, but you're hireable as a strategic thinker, as a person who can give direction. You're not hireable as the person who's the minion that's working underneath and trying to make all the gears work together. So I believe that you are hireable from a strategic, from a executive level because of all of your experience. And this is why I'm going to say one more thing, is that you don't get out of college and go into an executive position and have the same value. The value is in your experience. It's in my experience. It's what we learned through all of our years of being at these different companies and seeing how the machine works. And that's where the value is.
Yeah. And I've always said this to everybody that I've consulted with. The idea that if you get paid $200,000 a year or $400,000 a year, you're not paying me $400,000 a year to do this job. You're paying me $400,000 a year for the 25 years of experience I have that I'm bringing to you, all this intellectual equity I'm bringing to you. And the other thing that's really scary, and if anybody's listening and they want to make this leap, I can tell you one of the things that I've always told, and I've managed people before, and I've told them the same thing. If you ever feel like you're starting to be an administrator for the machine, you need to get out. You might be the director of marketing. You might be the director of finance. You might be the VP of marketing. At the end of the day, if what you're doing is managing decisions that are being made and administer those changes, you're an administrator. And if you have a college degree or a master's degree, understand that it's going to be too late one day when you figure out that what your role really was an administrator. And that's okay if that's what you'd like to do.
Right.
If you're okay with that, you're a program manager.
Right.
And that's the terrible thing to do if that's not what you want to do.
How many times have we seen VPs and directors be complacent, where they just literally sit in a meeting, they sit back, some of them are falling asleep, and here
and let
we
me
are.
stop you there.
Yeah.
Let me stop you there, because you and I have both seen this. You'll have C-suite people falling asleep in meetings, and these are very high ups, obviously. And you're looking around, you're like, this can't be real. I mean, there was a point where this can't be how the business works. But if it's a machine, it can sometimes. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if people are thinking, that never happens, that absolutely happens 100% of the time.
And it's one of those things that really disgusts me, because what you're talking about is, if you're in that role of being a director, you should be the one that's driving people forward. You should be acknowledging success. You should be making maneuvers in order to try to get to the final target, right? You should be thinking strategically and moving the company. And there's so many of them that we have seen where they're falling asleep in the meetings. They're taking other people's ideas and making them their own. How many times have we seen that? And instead of being the one that's truly the driving force. So I have to say, I'm going to go back to Troy. You are hireable. Well, they would be lucky to have you. And the fact is you are a guy who drives things forward, and that's powerful.
And the problem is that if you don't have people who have that same mindset. I remember I worked for another company, and I worked for a lot of them. The idea of answering a question of why should we do it this way, and the answer will always be because it's the right thing to do. And I know that's sort of a cheeky kind of answer, but I had situations where I was asked, well, we can't do it this way because it's going to cost too much money. And I go, what's the right thing to do? Well, the right thing to do is to spend the money and fix the problem. And the wrong thing to do is to ignore it and then put a Band-Aid on it. And I would say then that's always lead with what's the right thing to do. Defend what the right thing to do is. If we have to do the other thing, then we've got some big problems, and we need to fix those things. And I could tell you a lot of people just aren't in the mindset to fix things. They want to move forward. And it's the idea of um, curing the symptom and not going after the disease. And you and I are disease fighters. We want to find out, we're not putting band-aids on anything. We've got to. If you want to be a 100-year company, you have to foundationally be correct. But what I find, though, is there's very few people who want to put themselves out to do the work to build the foundation. They'd rather put band-aids on everything. And that's what I'm saying when you're unhireable. I mean, if I'm going to come in to your organization, I'm not going to just sit there and push some ideas around. I want to know who you are foundationally and see where we can get better. And I don't think people have an appetite for that. And I think, and I want to go back to this comment too, because when you said, you didn't say you were all on the same page. I do want to get to a point, and we don't have to talk about it now, but when you start your own business and you're hiring people to push your idea and to make it better, the importance of making sure everybody who's on your team has the same attitude towards building this company. And you said agenda. I think just making sure that everybody on your team understands why they're there, and they're there for the right reasons, and what's motivating them to do it. And my personal opinion that I've had people on my projects where the motivation was to go public as soon as you can. One motivation is I want to be rich. One motivation is I just want to put a product out. One motivation is I've never been a C-suite person before. I've never been a VP before, and I'd like those opportunities. And if your motivation isn't to make this product succeed, and if your motivation isn't to lose ego and pride through this journey, then you're going to fail, and it's going to be a nightmare. And so I want to jump a little bit of ahead. How do you make sure that the people that you're bringing onto your company have the right motivation?
That's a great question. So to start with, anytime you're in a startup company like ours, we were so tight on cash from the very beginning that you're hiring people who have to be passionate about the product. Otherwise, they're not interested. So it first starts with, and it sounds odd, but low pay. It starts off with paying them lower than what market is and saying, if you're on board with this, it's because you're passionate about the product and you want to drive this forward. If the product is successful, you'll be successful. The team will be successful holistically. So it's tying the success of them financially to the success of the product so that we are aligned. And people who are doing it just for the paycheck, they don't want to be hired by us, right? Because they want the bigger paycheck. And people who are willing to sacrifice because they see the vision, they like the founders, they think that this has a chance. Those are the ones that you end up hiring just for that reason. So it's not to say that we don't have turns, and it's not that we don't have issues going about, but you start off with people who are willing to take that sacrifice.
And the attitude has to be that, I want you to be part of this journey. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be stressful. And right now it's going to be a little bit lower on the pay end, but the effort needs to be there if this were a full paid job. So I don't want you to work less because you're getting paid less. And I've seen situations with you too, where someone was going to try and help you for free. But I think when people, and I hate this because it's happened to me millions of times, people will come in and say, hey, listen, I'll help you on this journey. But because you're not getting paid, you're not a priority. And it's difficult because if you say you're in, then you're in. And I think that's where friendships it's kind of a tricky thing with friendships and helping someone start out. But you can't say I'm going to help you and work towards this goal. But because you're not paying me, I may not always be there. I may not always make the meetings. I may come in and make a few suggestions. I think you have to be all in and to be careful of the idea of saying, I'm going to help you out. But remember what that means. It means that you're going to help me and you have to be all in. And I can't be a side project for 10% of the time unless I tell you up front, this is how much time I can give you. And I think that's where communication comes in, and also just sort of figuring out what do you really want from this experience. And, it happens, but I think you overcame that. I do want to go back to, and I preface that this was before COVID. because the idea that you had for this product, and when I say, I think you'll talk about your background a little bit and how you actually have the ability to create this product. Um, you decided before COVID that you wanted to do this, and then COVID happened, and it was probably the worst possible scenario for you. But talk about leading up to the product. What was it was obviously RKS Offroad,
Right.
and your background is in not just within RVs but outdoor mobility.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've always been outdoor ever since I was a child. Always wanted to be outdoor, always camping, always doing things like that with the family. Very important for me. Um, I was in the EV industry. This is where I met you. So manufacturing electric cars. I mean, you can't. There's very few products that can be as complicated as a car. So we're talking about engineering something that's complicated and being a part of that. I've always loved that side of things as well. So when you marry the two together, where we were doing the RV rental business and you have the OEM side of things, this is where RKS, came to fruition. And when it came to RKS, the reason for the R and the K and the S is because we're very family oriented. So RKS are the first initials of our three kids, Riley, Kinsey, and Sean. And we wanted to put this forward as we're doing this as a family run business. And that's how we treated it. So yeah, it all started right before COVID. It was unfortunate that all that happened, and we pushed through it though, even though everything was down and we had put some of our own money in already, and we were just prepared to drive this forward no matter what. Once we make that commitment, the loyalty, the dedication, and everything is all there to make this happen.
So what sparked the idea? Because I'm not even really sure myself. So you had the idea for the product. That was while you were going through the rental business for many years and seeing the product that was coming out.
Yes.
So the idea of this particular product.
Right. Like, why did we end up doing this, coming from the RV rental business and getting into actually making the product?
Well, yeah, because I'm trying to figure out, and I'll tell you this, because I've met a lot of people on the podcast, and I just had Mojave Gray. They're a band. They're releasing their album out August 25th, and fantastic for those guys. They're fantastic singers. They've got, I mean, really brilliant. But I've asked this question, and I'm really curious about your mind too. So when I talked to Xander and Posey's the guitarist, and he's brilliant guitarist, and I asked him, Posey, I said, "Hey, do you dream music? Are these notes constantly coming at you from somewhere, and you're reaching for them, and they're just constantly in your mind?" And I asked Xander the same thing, like lyrically, do you dream storytelling? Do you have these things in your mind that just won't go away, and it's constant information that's coming through, and something's feeding you? And obviously everyone has had that same experience where the idea keeps coming and it will not go away. And that's where the music comes from. That's where the storytelling comes from. I've never heard from an engineer when you're engineering the product that you were building. Did that come to you the same way? Were you constantly being fed in your mind, this is how big, wide, what it's supposed to do? Does that happen to you?
It does. I can't say it happens in my dreams, because honestly, I can't remember much of my dreams, and I'm sure I had some really good ones
right,
that I wish I would remember.
Which explains the huge shower in the purpose.
Yeah, exactly. You got to live your dreams.
Right.
And I'll tell you more about the shower in a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
The requirements put out. So you know what? It was during the rental business phase. We were in it from 2014, and we closed that up in 2020 because we need to focus on RKS. Being in that rental business and buying these new RVs and having a product that costs $120,000, and you drive it off the lot, and you literally have water pouring on your head from above you when you take it off the lot, or you have trim pieces in the interior literally falling off while you drive it home the first time. These are the experiences we were having with brand new RVs. These were Winnebagos. This is a Thor. I had a Thor unit where the floor after 1 year was dipping down so far that you felt like you're going to fall through the floor. We had to replace the entire floor, and Thor didn't cover it. And this is the thing. You spend this kind of money on a product. If you were to spend that money on a Mercedes and drive off the lot and water poured over your head, how long do you think Mercedes would stay in business if that was their common thing? And so what I've communicated in other talks is that the RV industry is like the automotive industry was back in like the early 80s, where they were all kicking out the same poor quality of product and didn't have any reason to change. And then Japan comes in with their product with improvements and starts eating their lunch. I feel like the RV industry is in that phase where there's other quality products coming out. It's in its dwarf stage. They're smaller businesses, but they're trying to come out with a lot better quality in these smaller businesses. And then I see the big conglomerates that they're still producing the same crap. And it's glued together, stapled together, and they fall apart. We also learned afterwards that a lot of times it comes off the line in Indiana. And when it reaches the dealership is spending up to a week making changes or improvements to the product, not improvements, repairs to the product, because it wasn't even suitable for them to sell to the customer. So there's a major issue in this industry, and I think it needs to be addressed. And because we were from the OEM side and we have connections with engineering and design people on the automotive, what we decided to do is take that automotive approach into the RV trailer business and redesign it from the ground up. And that's why we got excited. That's why we made the transition, because we felt we were in a better position than a lot of people to make that transition because of our network, because of our experience. So what you'll notice if you look at our product versus another trailer, designed very differently. The structure of it, the way the walls are done, the packaging of how you package things inside, done very differently. And it's thinking about, how do I make this more functional and how do I focus on the quality side of this product? It's not to say that we wouldn't have quality issues, because we're still buying some parts that are from the RV industry. And so we're dealing with that restriction, right? I'm not going to start redesigning how a heater works, but we can at least pull the best quality of those parts and try to integrate it into the best quality product. And that was our drive.
Yeah, and when you say that though, it's funny to me, because in my mind, and I'll say this a little bit later, there was a need to over-engineer, and maybe over-engineer isn't the correct term. Maybe it is to just engineer the best, not just over-engineer, but engineer the best. And I remember you telling me stories about the rentals that you would rent out and they'd come back. I'm not going to say a lot of them, but a lot of them treated your product like shit. You owned it. You would come back and be completely destroyed. And I don't know, from the mindset from OEMs that build these trailers, do they take that into consideration, that they probably should tighten up their stuff, because a lot of these are rented and very hard used out in the field. And you're the one that has to bring them back and go, why didn't they do it this way? I mean, obviously it's breaking because this is what they do when they're here.
It's the psychology of it. So think about it. When I'm renting this out and let's say something breaks, do you think the renter is blaming Winnebago, or are they blaming me?
Right.
Okay. So from the rental side, it doesn't matter that it goes out so frequently to Winnebago, because I'm the one who gets blamed that the product has a failure, even though it could be that the heater failed or the walls failed or whatever it might be. So, but when Winnebago sells the product to a consumer, how often do people normally go out? I mean, initially when they buy it, they might be excited about it and they might go out once a month. But after a little while, it's at the storage facility and they're like, oh, do I really want to drive over there, load everything up and go out? What ends up happening is that it starts off once a month, but then it becomes twice a year. And so then these RVs aren't even going out very often. They have maybe a 1 year or 2 year warranty on it. You have a problem with the RV? Oh, forget about it. You're going to have that RV in the shop for about a month, because the RV dealers, they don't do quick turnaround like you do in the regular automotive industry. So there's your RV sitting at the dealer lot waiting to get fixed. Oh, but your warranty time is still ticking. So it's one of those things that they really don't have an incentive to change. It's a major problem. It's a huge problem. And what makes it even worse from my perspective. So now this is a personal thing. I care about our environment. I really do genuinely care about our environment. I make business decisions based on the environmental impact. And so when you have an RV or trailer that's being pushed out, that's really a throwaway, where in 10 years, they'll be lucky if it's still glued together. That's a major problem to me, because the parts that go into that trailer are not good for the environment. There are a lot of things that are in a trailer that are just thrown in as the cheapest material they can find. And I have a major issue with this. So when we went to design our product, it wasn't just about quality and everyday, taking it out. It was about, how do we make this product last longer? To last generations was the statement that we made. It was actually our target was, this product needs to last generations. You want to be able to have it handed down to your children.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me this, and this was really interesting. What we have pictures shown throughout the podcast, so when we're talking about these things, you'll see them pop up on the screen. One of the ones was the that really struck me was the very first concept that you had. It was made out of wood, and
the mule.
The mule, yeah, and for anybody in the car business or not in the car business, a mule is really your first attempt at what this is going to look like. It's by no means is it the same material, but really just dimensionally what it's going to look like. And I remember you telling me, and I didn't even know this. Why do people still use wood? Because you're opposed 100%,
right?
And for probably the right reason. So why do OEMs that are building these trailers still use wood?
Oh, okay. So that's two different things. So one is, I use wood for the mule because for the mule because it's inexpensive and it's very easy to modify. When you're building the mule, our purpose of building our mule was a packaging exercise. We wanted to make sure if you were inside of this, how would it feel? So it was a mock-up of the interior in essence. So in what we call it in the engineering or design world is these are the hard points. So we have these hard points that we were establishing so that we can then use that in our CAD and package in the product. So we use wood, just easy to maneuver, easy to cut, or not maneuver, easy to modify, easy to cut. But in the final product, no wood at all. That was our directive. And the reason why is going to the manufacturing side of things. It's very inexpensive to use wood. That's why the big companies use it. It's inexpensive. It's very easy to modify. You don't need to tool up something special like you would with an aluminum panel, for instance. You'll have to laser cut it and have it, put in that way. But wood is inexpensive. It's easy to tool up and modify and have them come in the pieces that you need. And they do have like an insulating factor to them. So they are, you get aluminum, say, and you don't put it in correctly, it starts rattling all over the place, whereas wood tends not to do that. So they use it primarily for the bottom line, right? Everything for a lot of these companies is bottom line. How do we get as many pennies out of this? And literally I've seen it where they have made design decisions where they just save pennies, but at a detriment to the quality of the product. So they continue to work wood. They will continue to use wood, and it's not even just solid wood. It's the plywood, right? It's the glued stuff. Again, not environmentally friendly. They don't really care about that. They care about the bottom line and kicking out products that look good, but it's really the statement lipstick on a pig. It is so true. So they're making them look great, but underneath it's the same crap.
Yeah. So this was the frustrating thing for me. And it, again, just going through the other podcasts, it's very similar stories when we talk about once you get the product in mind, you've identified the white space, who the customer is, you identify why your product is necessary. And yours specifically, I want to talk about the investment side because part of the frustration I have with other friends of mine in this business, and in the entertainment business, in athletics, in entertainment in general, is that you created a product. And I'm going to mention a few things that you guys did differently. So the chassis was aluminum,
All aluminum.
which is very rare for the type of vehicle that you've produced. You've eliminated wood and used aerospace technology for the walls. I don't know that anybody uses that. You created a functional shower. You created a toilet that most man's asses can actually sit on and be comfortable doing.
Right.
The shower, we'll get into that a little bit later, because I really want you to talk about the shower, because I thought it's the only one that I've seen that actually fits you, because you're a tall guy. You could fit out of it. You had a full pull-out kitchen way before Rivian was even thinking about doing something. Your execution obviously is much better. But when you put this all on paper and you say, okay, well, to do all of these things the right way and to exist, this thing needs to cost this much. And I know that you went through a couple of investment rounds. And I know a lot of people get frustrated when they have the product and you're trying to explain to an investor on the other side of the table why you're doing this in this white space. It's frustrating for them to not understand that you've got a product that is exceptional, is leading class in every way. And I would suggest that even your trailer created a different segment within the RV size. I mean, your piece of the puzzle now is this new segment that nobody is in.
Well, I'll say there are people in it. They're in the small trailer, so it's not that was new. We have competitive benchmarking we were doing against some of the Australian brands, which are phenomenal, by the way, and they are trying to make a better quality product because they live it. A lot of Australians, they're in the outback. They're literally taking these and going months on end into the wild and wilderness, and they're in these small trailers. And so that's why they actually they have better quality product because they live it. I doubt that Winnebago CEO is actually living it in roughing it in the mountains. I mean, maybe they are, but I really doubt it. So coming into the space and talking about the investment, I'm going to go right into that now. What I found, and I've been fundraising for other companies before this. This is not the first time I've done this. I've done it for the hardware industry, I've done it for the automotive side, and now for trailers.
And just so I can preface this too, the programs that you work on the automotive side, you're talking $1 billion investments. These are not, when you come up with a car line or one vehicle, that program just on the cost itself is going to be over $1 billion. You're the guy that actually goes in and says, this is how all of this much is going to cost. This is where we need to be. So you were doing very high level, very important work for some large OEM. So you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, from a cost and budgeting perspective, you're absolutely right. I've done. I was finance manager for a product line for a car line. So I was seeing every part from powertrain, chassis, body structure, interior. So yeah, I have a really good idea as to what things cost. I have a really good idea as to when you prototype something, what's the multiplier, if it's a concept versus a production validation vehicle. Yes, I mean, I was in a big part of the development of cars. So, but when it comes to the fundraising side, the trick has been getting in front of the right people. And it's really difficult to do because there's all this noise out there. There's these companies that like VCs, for instance, and they have certain investments that they're looking for, very specific. And a lot of times these investments that I'm finding are most important to their portfolio are soft product investments. So when I say soft product, just to give a little bit more definition to that, these are the technological investments, right? These are the ones where they're trying to make another new software package or a new game is coming out. That's soft product. And with soft product, the beauty of that is you go through development, but you can change very easily. You make the product, it's a lot easier to get something out there versus a hard product like our trailer, where I have to build a full trailer. Like we have to physically figure out where all these parts are, put them all together. And if it doesn't work, it's not as easy as code to be able to just insert a little code and fix the problem. So it's much more labor intensive. And because of that, it actually is higher risk. So a lot of these portfolios, they stay further away from the hard product because there's more risk involved. There's delivery risk. There's a supply chain risk. There's a assembly risk. There's human resources required in order to build the product. Whereas with soft product, once you have it developed, you just need the people to maintain it. Okay. So when you go out into the investment community and you're saying, hey, we're beautiful, we're new, we're making things better, we're a better quality product, we care about the environment. And not only that, but look at how beautiful this is. People love it. They take it out. And it's designed to last generations. It solves all these problems, and it's made for the off-road, made for off-grid, so that people can get away from their homes, get away from everything, and be able to live for the moment in nature. They don't care. They don't care. Everything is about whatever requirement they had in order to get the return. Here I go hitting the table.
I know, you're very animated about this.
Yeah, very passionate. But it's hard to pitch them something that when you first walk in the door, they're already thinking, oh, hard product. Okay. Does it fit? I don't know. And a lot of times it didn't. I mean, we had a lot of people, individuals, organizations that we talked to, and it seemed like everything was good. I mean, we have a lot of great product ideas for the future as well, of how we had this roadmap for the product to get to this one target, which is really important to us, which is to be truly off-grid, where you have sewage, you have water, you have power, you have food source. Even we were talking about greenhouses that actually on a rotisserie that actually like bring in the sun and you grow stuff, and waste. So how do you handle compost? And maybe the compost then becomes the manure that goes into the plants, and so on. So we're thinking much bigger than just that small trailer we first came out with. We're thinking about pods, and we're thinking about how we can help the military or even oil refinery companies where they need something dropped in an isolated place. We were talking to emergency response teams that have to go in after a hurricane where there's no water, no power. And how are they going to help these people? These are the things that we love. This is where our ultimate goal is, to be truly off-grid. And so when we pitch this to investors, they just think, oh, it's too much. There's too much risk. Who knows if you're even going to make it there? We will make it there. That's the thing. They don't understand the passion behind this and what that means, the loyalty and the dedication to this company.
Yeah, it was frustrating to see your pitch deck too, because the pitch deck was very well done, very well written. You and Elizabeth both come from very strong backgrounds, especially on the engineering side and the construction side. You've seen the best. I mean, when you say OEM quality, I mean, you're talking about a product that is engineered the same way or even better than a Mercedes would be engineered. You're using materials that no one is using right now, but you can see where you were going. And that's the part that frustrates me, because there's a lot of companies out. I mean, I'll stick to automotive just because that's been fairly significant to me. Some of the startups right now have one vehicle, and you'll see an investor come out of Saudi Arabia and give this company $1 billion or $2 billion. They have one car. The car is overpriced. Its performance is good, but that changes every year when performance gets better. But to story tell a new OEM coming into the automotive space with one vehicle and gets investment for $2 billion. And then I look at what you're doing, and this is what COVID taught everybody. You probably know this better than anybody listening, is when COVID happened, what happened to the RV business?
Oh, it boomed. When COVID happened, everybody was itching to get out of the house, and nobody wanted to stay in a hotel. So if it came to travel, they're like, we'll buy our own RV and we'll just travel around. And that way we don't have to worry about being in some bathroom that other people were in.
Yeah. And you guys were busy. You guys were sold out. Not just your company, but a lot of other companies during COVID. People saw that they wanted to be outdoors, and a lot of people decided this is the kind of life they want to live. And when you go to an investor and go, you see this trend, the director, you can see the trajectory of what's happening in this space. And like you said, outside of automotive, SaaS, which is software as a service, which is like Facebook, any software as a service, like you said, doesn't require a lot of investment. It could change every day if you wanted to. And the struggle you had, and there was one struggle in particular, the investment side alone. But I remember I was at work, and you had called me, and I was actually in the parking lot going to lunch, and you had a bank that was going to lend you money, and that it was very positive. The whole experience seemed like it was going well, and then at the last minute, I don't know if they ghosted you or they just said they couldn't do it. What was that conversation? And I'm sure a lot of people who go through this process of talking with banks, and it seems like it's going the right direction, it usually ends up the way that you're going to explain it.
Yeah, it's what you're referring to as well isn't like a big bank institution or anything. It was actually more fund finding companies. These are companies that try to, they go to the family funds or they go to high net worth individuals and put something together. And we get a lot of those. I'm sure a lot of startups get, confronted with these people where they have all these promises. They said, "Oh, your product's great. We have the right investors for you. This is all you need to do." Some of them require money up front. And then they're like, "Oh, we're going to get you funded in like a month." Like, this is great. This is great. A month goes by, crickets. And you're amped up, right? You put all this effort into it. You revised your deck. You got it sent over. You're excited. You're thinking, okay, they're going to get us in front of the right people. We can then focus on the product and not focus on fundraising. And this goes to also one of the challenges of starting your own business is you want to be focused on just getting your product out. But the problem is that you're so focused on getting the money in that it's a very difficult thing to keep focused on the product while you're fundraising. So here I am, excited about this, thinking, okay, we're going to make it. Like, this is it. And you start making plans based on this idea that, okay, we're going to get the funds in, and then crickets. And it's such a roller coaster emotionally. It's one of these things that you have so much hope for your company and so much hope. Hope is what keeps you going. It's that idea that if I work hard enough, we'll make it. If I put in that extra time, if I do that extra thing, we'll make it. And this is where it leads to the depressing side of things in the business side is when you get shut down enough times, Troy, it does get to the point where you start wondering if you are going to make it. And then you start questioning whether I put in this extra effort, is it going to make a difference? And you start thinking that it's going to be a failure before you even start. And when you start thinking that way, you're immediately going to fail. And this is where this roller coaster of the ups and downs where you're working with investors has been trying mentally on not only myself, but also the employees, the families, everybody who's tied to it affects. And, and the whole time you're just trying to get your idea out there. You're just trying to get in front of that right person. And I still feel to this day, there is that right person out there, but we're having such a hard time getting in front of them. And my fear is that our company will go under before that happens.
Yeah. And that's honestly, when I talked to you about this podcast before we even started the podcast, I've had issues with Kickstarter. I have issues with those types of services because it sort of feeds into there's a group out there that'll give you a little bit of seed money. But at the end of the day, Kickstarter isn't going to fund programs. They're not going to fund what's necessary to stay competitive and be a 100-year company. I think it's nice and playful. You can do some things with Kickstarter, but this program, I think the reason why we started the How Strong one was to showcase people like you and get a different perspective. So it's different to explain to an investor who the people are behind the pitch deck and the amount of enthusiasm they have. Because if an investor saw you today and goes, I'm not betting on this product, I'm betting on Travis, that's a different conversation. And I think that's the more important piece, because if an investor saw you and saw how passionate you were about doing the right things and not budging on quality and not budging on customer satisfaction, that would be like, we're just betting on Travis. He's the brand. The product's fantastic, but it doesn't get made without Travis. And I think that's where this particular podcast comes into play, because I really wanted RKS to find a home with someone. But you as a person, I think, is more of the investment than the product is. I know we'll always get a good product from Travis and Elizabeth.
I appreciate that. I think you're absolutely correct on the initial investment. When they put money in, it should be based on the people, the founders, the vision, and then the passion to drive it forward. I think that in the development of that business, there's this transition that needs to happen. And this is where we had it in our plan to transition away from me being necessary for the success of the company. And that's the transition, right? So they put in the investment, but if I'm the reason why that company is successful, if I die, then their investment dies too. So our goal with the investment coming in was to make it so that the company is successful within itself. The team, the core team, was substantial enough in its intelligence and its abilities and drive that if I were to die in a car crash, that the company would still go on. The dream, the vision, everything. Not to say that it wouldn't change a little bit, because obviously I'm one of the driving forces here. But you're right. Yeah, when the investment comes in, they're initially investing in the person. And a lot of these people never even had a chance to meet me. Never. They just looked at a deck. They looked at my name. They said, oh, this guy has some experience. That's great. And probably just flipped the page.
And I think that's the disconnect. And I think that's where VCs and maybe some private equity, they're looking at this as a piece of paper, thinking, what's the quickest way I can turn a profit on this particular product for our company? And I would say, you've got a guy like Travis King who's going to be around for the next 40 years. This is just a stepping stone with our relationship. This is just that product. But there's this huge amount of product line that goes beyond what you wanted to build. And that's where I think if people really saw who you were as a person and the product, I think it'd be a no-brainer. People would do it all day long. And I think that's why this podcast is going to be created, and we're going to do that. And we're going to showcase RKS and a lot of other people. I do want to show the impact, though, what these VCs don't see. And that's the dark side of being a startup, which is the impact of saying, they've got a great product, we want nothing to do with them. And I think you can only take so much of that when you know you've got a great product. And I think the backstory for this is you've been in automotive, you know how to design it, you know how to build it, you know what people want, you know what white space is there, you know where the trends are going, you know who the competitors were because you rented out all those competitors. You've driven everything. You know exactly what this thing can and can't do. And then you also have this vision for the future of where this product should go and where customers are going. And the mental toll it takes when you're so vested in doing the right thing, it crushes you. And it's not like for them, they'll say, no, I didn't like what you had on paper. We'll move on. And you know, we're adults and we understand that they have to move on from these things, but the impact of having the right product at the right time, at the right price for the right customer, and all you need is this investment to move forward. It is, and we talked about depression, and we're going to have a whole episode on depression when it comes to the startup culture.
All right,
but
Dr.
I want to
Phil.
ask you. No, I know, but I want to ask you though.
I'm not crying for you, Troy. I'm just letting you know there's no tears in this show.
No, it's hot over where you're at. I did want to know, because we're going to be talking to Kenny Sanders from Old Sword Motorcycle next, and he was in the same space you were. He's a little bit you're way past where he was at in terms of the building of a company. He's going through the same thing, and I think he's going to find some really good similarities between what you've done and what he's doing. But what I want to know now, before we, we're gonna sign off, and then we're gonna be with Kenny in a little bit here, is what kind of person do you think it takes to do what you do? Now, knowing what
Ooh.
you know now,
Yeah.
who is that person? What do they have to continue this?
Okay. So one thing is you need a network. You need a network of people around you who are passionate people who are also hard workers. So the network, really important. The next thing is going to be just experience. It's the going through something of a similar industry at least, and being in different areas of the business, not just focused in your own swim lane doing just engineering. That's not going to get you here. You need to be involved in the budgeting process. You need to be involved in some strategic decision making with the business. So I think that knowledge of and the experience of the past is absolutely essential. Now, it's not to say that some people don't come straight out of college and have successes. We've seen these, but just seeing a few of these doesn't make it normal. It's a good thing. I love it when I see that happen. But that's not the norm. Okay. I'm just talking the norm, and I'm not talking in absolute terms here either. Okay. But the network, the experience, and then it's going to be that drive. A lot of people, what is your drive? What drives you? For me, it might be that I just want to have the best product out there. I want something out there that I can be proud of. For other people, it might be money. And that doesn't necessarily make it wrong. You know, they might go into it and they just want to make good money. But I am going into this for myself, for the product. The passion is in the product and making a difference, making a positive difference. And it's not to say we won't have failures. Yes, we will have failures. We will push the boundaries. We will learn from them and we will make it better. But we will always focus on quality and we'll always focus on the customer. If we do those two things, we will be successful. And that's the mindset. That's the if you work hard enough, again, we talked about this just a moment ago, you try hard enough, you do that extra step, it might make the difference of success. So you just keep pushing forward and you dedicate yourself to it. Troy, I can't tell you, I don't think I've had a vacation in the last 5 years. I actually, I shouldn't say that. It's 4 years. We did go to Austria for Elizabeth's family, but other than that, I haven't had a vacation, man. I do whatever I can with the family and taking care of raising kids, and they've been wonderful. They've been understanding through this whole journey, but it's been trying. There have been times of absolute depression, sadness. There's been times where I feel like I'm motivated again and I just jump back up and I'm geared up and I'm ready to go. And the cycles that happen while you're in this startup is immense. The emotional side, the strength, and I guess this really feeds into your podcast, is the how strong you have to be to go through that roller coaster and be able to stand up again. I can tell you that there's a few favorite lines. One of them is Batman. Why do you fall down? Is so you can get up again. And all that saying rang true for me. It's like, I want to get back up again. I want to do it better. We're going to do it better. The other side of it is failure is not about failing. Failure happens when you don't get back up again, when you don't try, when you stop trying, that's when you're a failure. Failure isn't from failing. Failure is from stop trying. You no longer care. That's failure.
And we talked about this too, that success is a succession of wins and losses. And you'd hope that at the end of the day, you have more wins than losses. And that's really what it is to me. I mean, people fail, of course you do, but at the end of the day, success really is having more wins than losses. And I want to go back to this though, because I really want to know, you said you have to have a circle of people, you have to have a lot of these things, but what type of person do you need to be, knowing what you know now? What type of person do you need to be to start what you started?
You need to be dedicated everything into it. Everything. Your life is that company. When you wake up, you think about, what are we going to do next? When you go to sleep, you're stressing out about what you're going to do next. It's on your mind constantly.
But you have to also, I was getting to a point, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced in my career is managing people, because people have, if you have people working for you, you have a team of 20 or 20 or 100 people, every one of them are motivated differently. And what type of person do you need to be when you're doing this startup? Do you need to be sensitive to everybody that's working for you, or do you need to have a conversation? We're literally at war in trying to bring this company forward. So it may not always be the best conversations that we're going to have. And you need to be the type of person who, if I'm working for you and I hear something negative from you, we've got to just move on. It's not personal. We have to get this thing going. And I don't know that if you come into this role being the best manager you'll ever be, I think you have to put that aside, and you have to be able to communicate to your team. The next year is going to be difficult, and don't take everything personal. Understand the mission, and let's move forward. So that's the kind of, like, you have to come in and say, let's start off day one. We just grind.
It is true. And you have to put egos aside. I mean, you don't have to per se, but I believe that it makes for a much better success rate in that you put your egos aside, you're working towards the same goal, and you make that goal very clear. You don't make it so it's wishy-washy and now we're doing this and the next day we're doing something else. No, we're focused on this is our goal. So I think that as we go through this and we talk about the people that you surround yourself with, you're surrounding yourself with people who are as passionate as you are about the product. They have the same or similar drive to why they're there. And the hard part of that is sometimes, like, we had a case where a good friend of ours joined up and we worked really well together initially. And then we actually had a lot of conflict. We had a lot of conflict because he was equally as passionate about the product, but passionate in a different direction, that the product needed to go one way versus another. And reconciling that, there were times of arguments, there were times of hugs and arguments. I mean, it was just a cycle with between him and me. And to this day, he's always a friend for life. And I appreciate him. I respect him. And he's off doing another project. But I'll tell you that tension, it's good as long as it's respectful. And there were times when it did not go with respect. It did get disrespectful sometimes. But we always came back to each other and reinforced we're on the same team and we're driving towards this. We just have different ideas here. And then we started addressing where were the differences. And once we started addressing that, we started getting more on the same page. So it's about having that passion, but it's also, like you were talking about, it's managing that. It's bringing people together, and it's managing the conflict, and it's driving towards a common goal.
Yeah. And this is the exciting thing too. I wanted to mention that this is not the last time we see Travis. Travis is actually going to be on How Strong, and we've got a series under that Startup Nation series when we're going to talk to a lot of different startups. And I think Travis is an excellent host on this, because he's gone through the ideation phase all the way up to the phase of not getting investment. And you've ridden that roller coaster many times.
Multiple
I think
times.
we're gonna discover a ton of stuff for these other companies that we're going to have on the podcast. But the Travis story doesn't end here. It's impossible. It's going to be 6 episodes, but we're always going to lean into Travis initially to kind of get his take on, still what did it take for him to get RKS up and off the ground, how it impacted his life. And that story is going to unfold here over 6 episodes. And I'm really anxious to get the story out, because it's so frustrating to see someone like you and your family. And I've got to know your family. I mean, they're amazing. And the dedication you have to making sure that slice of family that you carve out for them is that slice. There's the RKS world, but there's also that slice of family that has to be there for you. And it's an amazing story. So we'll continue this with Travis. We have our next podcast is going to be with Kenny Sanders from Old Soren Motorcycle. And Travis, loved having you on today. We're going to have many more conversations about you and what you're doing and where you see RKS going. But until next time, I appreciate your time, man. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Troy. We'll talk soon.
Here I find